Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this video, you are going to learn about shell scripting. So, what is meant by shell scripting and all these things we are going to learn in this session. So, why we call it shell scripting as for a DevOps engineer? So, we already know some Linux basics here. Linux is a free operating system and open source. These things we already know. Okay, and also it is a multi-user based operating system. And also we have know about Linux is secure. And then Linux is a CLI based operating system. We are already aware of it. And it is highly recommended for project related servers. Project related servers. That means in which areas it can be, like for example, database, SonarQube, Jenkins, like CI/CD, Nexus for artifact management, and Kubernetes, creators, and many things. Okay, so for that Linux, we are utilizing this kind of areas. But when coming to shell scripting, before understanding shell scripting, we already know like Linux architecture components. Architecture components. So what will going to be happen in Linux architecture components? Whenever user interacting with the application, whenever user working on application, or maybe is working with the commands, is working with the commands, who will take the request? Shell will act as an intermediate between the commands, whatever the commands which are user entering it. So it will take the user commands about it, and then kernel we having it, and then we have hardware components, right? These are the architecture component we having it, right? Commands were whatever the commands we are entering it with the help of shell. So shell transfer this request to the kernel so that kernel will transfer this request to the hardware components. This is how the architecture components will be looks like. Even if you check in Google, even if you check in Google, Linux architecture components, Linux architecture components. If I check on the images, you can see here in the first image itself. Okay, applications, commands, what can be. So applications, compilers, date, cd, vi, these are all the commands. Okay, for whatever the commands which we are entering, that request will be taken by the shell, and then kernel will take the request of the shell, and then kernel will transfer the request to the hardware, so that it will act as a mediator between user and kernel. Okay, so if someone asks you the question, what is the shell? Okay, what is the shell? If someone asks you the question, what we are going to answer about it? Okay, what is shell? Okay, shell acts as a mediator between user and kernel. Okay, and shell is responsible to process user given commands. But here there is an important point. Whenever we execute the command, shall first verify the instructions, shall verify the command syntax or instructions, we can say syntax or instructions. Okay, and then what is going to be happen if the command is valid, then shell will convert that command into understandable format. Kernel understandable format. So the shell scripting, if you are going to the Windows, it won't work. We have a Windows default PowerShell window we'll be having it. For example, if I right click here, you can see terminal or admin. Okay, this is the default PowerShell we having it, and also command prompt we having it. But when it comes to Linux, we have a shell scripting we having it. Okay, so if I wanted to check what is the shell of our Linux VM, for that we will go and create the Linux VM and then we'll go to the practical. So here I'm having my Azure portal. In this Azure portal, I wanted to create a virtual machine. So I have written a script to create the virtual machine of the Linux. So now I'm executing the script and let's see what is going to be happen. To log into the Azure, I'll be selecting my account, click on continue, and then it will ask my subscription details. I'll select my default subscription, and then it will create a resource group, and it will create the virtual machine of Red Hat Linux. We can use whatever the version we want. I'm using Red Hat Linux for this tutorial. Let's wait for a moment and let's check. We have successfully created the Linux virtual machine. So let's try to log in about it. If I go to the portal, it will provide the steps for me. You can see the virtual machine has been created here. Okay. The Linux, in the PowerShell window, you can see here it is the syntax. I'm getting it by default. I designed the shell script like this. Okay. So to clear the screen and I pasted the IP address, SSH username and the IP address, IPS, and then type the password. Okay. And I have successfully logged into the machine. Now, if I give who am I, here comes like a normal regular user. Okay. Now, I wanted to check in this mission what is the default shell of our Linux virtual machine. Okay. So for that, we will use echo echo and then dollar shell. If I give this command, you just observe. It is the default shell which we are having in this Linux virtual machine. By default, slash bin slash bash. It is the default shell which is available to this machine. Now, are there any kind of other shells which will support for this Linux virtual machine? For that, we will use cat slash etc and then shells. Whenever I execute this command, you can just check here. There are other shells like sh, bash, bin sh, and bin bash. Okay, these are all shells which are available to my Linux virtual machine. Then, what is meant by kernel in Linux? We understood about what is shell. Now, we'll understand about what is kernel in Linux. So, kernel is a kernel is a part of Linux operating system. Kernel is a mediator between shell and hardware components. So, kernel will get instructions from shell, and then kernel will convert that command, kernel that convert that command into hardware understandable format. Hardware understandable format. Okay. Suppose I wanted to check what is the kernel information about my Linux virtual machine. So for that, we will use the command called as uname-r. It will print the kernel related information. So let's check. Okay. So you can observe here, this is the kernel information which we are getting it for this Linux virtual machine. If you are using Ubuntu, you might get getting different output over here. Okay. Now, then what is meant by scripting here? What is meant by scripting here? Scripting is nothing but a set of commands, a set of commands we are keeping in a file for execution. That means, for example, in this Linux mission, I'm executing some commands. Who am I? Please tell me which current session it is belong to. PWD, what is the current working directory? Okay, and then ls. I don't have any files. Suppose I wanted to create an empty file. Touch command test dot test1 dot txt sample dot py. These are all the commands I want using to create files here. Suppose whatever the commands which I have executed, these all commands I wanted to execute in a scripting format. So I will keep these commands in a one file. I will execute that file so that one by one, whatever the order which I have executed here, the same order, if I place the commands in that file, it will execute the same output over here. Understanding? Scripting is used to automate our daily routine tasks. Scripting is used to automate daily our routine tasks. For example, these are the commands I have executed. Now, I will place these commands in one of the file so that let's check what will going to be happen. Okay. Instead of executing these commands in manually, we'll create a keep them into this one of the file so that we can execute that file, which we'll be calling it as scripting here. The process of executing script using shell is called as shell scripting. I hope it makes sense. The process of executing script file using shell is called shell scripting. So, shell scripting is used to automate our daily routine tasks or daily routine works in the project. What are the works it can be when you're taking, like analyzing the log files or system health checks, or maybe taking the backup or deleting temporary files or deleting some unwanted files here. Okay, for all these use cases, we'll be executing using shell scripting here. So shell script files will always end with the extension called as .sh. .sh is the extension. Is this mandatory? Like for example, if I wanted to give backup.sh, health check.sh, test.sh, like that, I can give whatever the file names I want, I can give it here. Okay. Many people will have a doubt Then what is the difference between programming and scripting here? Like programming requires a compilation for execution. Like if you take C program, if you write C++ program or Java program or C sharp. If you take whatever the instructions which you have of the file, okay. Suppose if it is a Java program, you will be typing something and you are executing it. You are compiling it first before executing it. Whether the syntax is currently valid or not, you are going to check that. Okay. Once after checking it and you are executing it. That means here you require a compilation, whether to check whether the syntaxes are properly executing or not, so that you execute the file over there. Okay, whereas scripting can be executed directly, no compilation here. Like if you take Python, there is no compilation for Python. There is no compilation for Python. For example, let me open the Python file in my window, next window. Okay, if I execute Python, it will be working as an interpreter mode. Okay, now if I give the instruction of print hello Chaitanya, like this are information I'm giving it. Okay, now it doesn't require any kind of compilation. Whenever I execute enter button over here, you can see I'm immediately getting the output here. I'm immediately getting the output here. Okay. Whereas the other programming language like C, C++, and all these things, whether first you need to compile it and then executing it. That is what it will going to be happen. Whereas scripting can execute it directly here. For Bash or Perl or Python, if you take any of the programming languages of scripting, it doesn't require any kind of compilation here. It will be executed directly over here. Okay. Now, immediately, like if you're attending for interview, if you're mentioning shell scripting, I know about it. So immediate question they're going to ask is, what is shebang? In Linux, what is shebang? Okay. Shebang is used to specify which shell we would use to process our script file. Understanding? Like for example, in previously, when I executed this, like cat etc shells, if among any of these shells, if you're utilizing like bash shell or sh shell, that related information we wanted to present it in the shebang format. How the format will looks like the syntax will be hash exclamatory mark and then slash bin slash bash. This is how we'll write in the shell scripting file. But there is a catch of important interview point. They will ask you whenever whenever you are writing this shebang, is this really important to maintain this shell script file? Shebang. Writing shebang. Writing shebang is not mandatory but recommended. I hope it's making sense. Whenever you're writing a shell script file, if you're mentioning this shebang like bin bash, okay, this is nothing but shebang. If you're mentioning that one, it will be recommended. It's not mandatory. Even if you execute the script, it will work. Okay. Now let's try to write some kind of shell script here. Like I'll be writing the shell script file will be like for example slash bin then bash. I will give echo enter your name. Okay. From outside, I will create something called as read name. This is a variable. We'll be talking about the variables and all these things. It's just a sample shell script file. I'm giving it over here. Echo good morning. Good morning. And then it has to give whatever the name we're giving it along with that name. Good morning name. Okay. Suppose if I enter Madan, good morning Madan. Good morning John. Good morning test. good morning, triple H, good morning, Rey Mysterio. Like that, it's going to be happen. Okay, let's execute this shell script file. Okay, I have present these all the files. Now, what I will do is I will use nano editor to create a shell script file. You can use VI editor as well. Okay, I'll give the file name as first.sh. First.sh. Now, I have opened it. I can type manually here. Otherwise, I can simply copy paste the commands which I have written over here. Control C, then Control V. Okay. Once we enter the information, to save the file, Control to save and enter. Control X to exit of the file. Okay. For example, if I want to check the output, you can see here. Okay. Now let's execute this file by using bash and then first.sh. You can use that one, or maybe you can use sh as well, or you can use sh and then first.sh. Any of the file, any of the ways it will go to work. Okay, so I'll use bash first.sh. It is asking my name, so let me enter my name. Okay, and then click on enter. Good morning, Chaitanya. Like this way, we will use the shell script as an example here. Okay, this is our first shell script file. Remaining part will continue on next session. Thank you.